Welcome back for another episode of Beta Bay Ball. I'm your host, Justin Therio, and today's an exciting one. Instead of recapping a Rhode Island loss to a not-so-great team, we can talk about a Rhode Island win over maybe a decent team. I don't really know. Rhode Island men's basketball comes down with a 88-82 win over the Massachusetts Minutemen. It'll be the last time that Massachusetts enters the Ryan Center as a member of the Atlantic 10. It's pretty depressing. I mean, this is a inter-conference rivalry that dates back decades and decades and truly defines New England basketball. And this game kind of was that representation in a microcosm, kind of, at least according to Frank Martin, head coach of Massachusetts. And we also are going to talk about the thumping that Rhode Island women's basketball gave to Fordham. Now, Fordham has been pretty good in conference and have an overall decent record, but their net rating not all that high. We're going to start with the men's basketball. It was, I already wrote my recap for it for mid-major basketball, and I described it as one of those games where, you see the point differential of 6. Right, 88-82 game. You must have thought, if you didn't watch the game, you probably thought that you're looking at this really high-scoring basketball game with tons of lead changes, ties, just an exciting kind of game that will keep you glued to your seat, right? Instead, we didn't get that. We got two massive runs that completely changed the way this game looked. And obviously it started out in favor of Massachusetts. Rhode Island, once again, in typical Rhode Island men's basketball fashion, came out of the blocks pretty sluggish. They went 0 for 5, and at one point were 5 of 15 from the field to start the game. But 19 first half points for Sebastian Thomas. I mean, what a star he has been. This game was another one of those games where you just make the case for him being the player of the year in the Atlantic 10. And behind his lead and Jaden House as well in the first half, the Rams went on to shoot 17 of 25 the rest of the way in that first half. And they even out-rebounded the Minutemen 28-18 in the first half, which is meaningful just because since conference play has started, the Frank Martin-led Minutemen have led the conference in rebounds per game with 41. And I keep mentioning Frank Martin because he spent some time at Kansas State. And he spent plenty of time, about a decade, at South Carolina. That's what his team was known for. It was known for its physicality. It'll push you around. And we saw that. Daniel Rivera was just shoving around Javonte Brown in the first few minutes. And for the rest of the game, he was shoving around David Green, David Fuchs. And these are guys who are really strong, and they've proven that to us over the past couple of years. And yet, to Rivera, it didn't matter. Rivera's a dog. Originally went to St. Louis. He was actually in the Ocean State last year at Bryant before coming to UMass, returning to the A-10. He's from Puerto Rico. One of those international players that just plays with that ferocity, that physicality. Rhode Island has one of their own, and David Fuchs, and he did much of the same too. When Javonte Brown to start the game was kind of getting shoved around, we saw Fuchs come in just 2 minutes into the game, a pretty early substitution, and with House starting, it's interesting to see Fuchs be the first guy off the bench. Not that I disagree with that rotation decision. Actually, I think it's a good decision. But he came in for the physicality, and it worked. He had 4 or 5 rebounds I think it was 4 rebounds in his first 3 minutes on the floor, which was one shy of tying Massachusetts as a team to that point. He was one of the only Rams on the floor that, was when they were going up for the ball, they were tipping it back out to his teammates, which was nice to see. Regardless, though, Rhode Island, they started slow. UMass got out to a decent lead, but all of a sudden, Rhode Island just absolutely eviscerated UMass over the span of 17 minutes. In 17 minutes and 20 seconds, Rhode Island outscored the Minutemen 48-21. It was a run that started with the Rams down by 6 points early in the game, and it ended with them up 21. During that run, like I mentioned, Rhode Island shot fantastic. I mentioned the 17 for 25 number. That eventually grew to 66.7%. So 2/3 of all their shots went down on 36 shot attempts, including 6 threes. And it looked like Rhode Island had really returned to that early season form that got them out to that 9-0 start. The way it looked a lot like they did against Davidson. And then it all just disappeared really quickly. Massachusetts realized that Rhode Island, I don't want to use the term playing with their food. I'll quote Archie Miller here instead. He said immaturity, silliness, a lack of concentration really got the game going in the wrong direction. He said that Massachusetts plays really hard, and rebounding, like I mentioned, is really important against the Minutemen. And Rhode Island did do a good job of that in the first half. And to start the second half, they went on a 13-0 run out of the break, and they rebounded well during that run. And at the end of the game, they got the rebounds that mattered. But during UMass's 14-minute stretch where they just maybe even dominated the Rams worse than the Rams dominated the Minutemen, they just couldn't rebound worth a damn. And that's been sort of an issue at times for this team, which is frustrating because you have a 7-foot center. Dalvin Fuchs is known as a fantastic rebounder, has really good rebound rates, really good rebounding numbers on a per 36 basis. He's just a fantastic player, in my opinion. And David Green has some size, so you'd like to see him rebound really well. I mean, you really shouldn't have a game, and I guess this happens in the NBA too. We see guys like Peyton Pritchard are good at this, but like Sebastian Thomas coming out with 8 rebounds is fascinating, right? How does that not go to another Ram? And Thomas himself delivered clutch free throws down the end of this one. I was listening to the A10 Talk podcast earlier. Shout out Zach Petrick, and he had mentioned what was it? Now I'm blanking on it. The foul trouble and the fight underneath the basket. We saw someone throw Jaden House into the student section. He gets up. David Green is hand fighting kind of with another player on Massachusetts, and they end up giving both sides a tech. Or was it? I can't remember if they gave both sides a tech. They gave both sides like warnings or something. And like Zach said on the A10 Talk, Bill Koch, a wonderful sports writer, sports reporter for the Providence Journal, said to us that they're going to call it tight for the rest of the way, and that's exactly what happened. Rhode Island has struggled with fouling this season, and of course they got into Massachusetts was able to get into the double bonus pretty darn early, and they just continued to draw foul after foul after foul, but when it came to foul shooting, Rhode Island delivered when it matters. We saw Thomas make 3 clutch free throws in the last 46 seconds. Jaden House made some clutch free throws as well. And Jaden House kind of had the play of the game. And I think it was Zach that also said this, I think. So if it wasn't him and it was someone else and you're listening to this, let me know so I can give you your credit, because this is a really true statement that whenever the game's on the line, the ball's up in the air, it's always Jaden House that gets up the highest and comes down with the rebound. And that's exactly what happened 22 seconds ago. Jaden House, his head is practically up to the square on the backboard. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but that's what it feels like. And he comes down with the rebound with a strong 6'4", 200-something pound frame, and he's able to secure it. They foul him. Like I already mentioned, he makes the free throws. So Rhode Island able to survive the run that Massachusetts had gone on in that one. And Massachusetts in that second half, it was really guys like Jalen Curry, who was really good. And Curry's been a great initiator for the Minutemen this season. And in this game, we take a look at the box score. Only 3 assists, so Rhode Island did a pretty darn good job of kind of keeping him in check. Rhode Island overall, outside of that obviously long 14-minute stretch, played really good defense. But a lot of those points for Massachusetts sort of came in the transition during that, or second chance points. 23 second chance points. They had more second chance points than they had points off turnovers or fast break points. It was difficult to watch at times for Rhode Island. For Massachusetts, they had 39 rebounds and 19 of them were offensive boards. That's just, you can't let that happen. And it was Daniel Rivera, the guy I was talking about, who had 5 offensive rebounds. So Jalen Curry sort of held in check in terms of his playmaking. But we also saw, I think, is it Daniel or is it Danny? What is it? Let me pull it up right here. Yeah, Daniel Hawkins Sanford. I don't know too much about the kid, but I guess he was dealing with a hand injury, according to some reporters from Massachusetts that were there asking Frank Martin questions after the game. And he's finally starting to feel like himself. And we saw whatever, Hawkins Sanford is feeling like himself. We saw that in the second half. He scored 10 plus I think it was 10 or 12 for him in that second half, and he had a plus minus of 13. Well, no other Minuteman had a plus minus above 5 in that second half. So it was him, Jalen Curry, Hawkins, Sanford, and Diggins. And Diggins is fantastic. I wrote in my preview article that Diggins was going to have to will the Minutemen to this win. He's averaging 24 points per game in conference play, which is nearly double what he was averaging in non-conference this season. He's really been one of the best scorers in the conference since A10 play started, averaging 4 threes a game. In this one, he got 27 points. You could say he got his, as I use air quotes, but it was not efficient. 10 of 21, 21 shots for 27 points isn't gross, but then plus 7 free throws, which you made 5 of. So if you erase the free throws, which obviously you wouldn't normally do, it's a skill to get to the line, in my opinion. But if you erase those, you say 22 points on 21 shots, right? Not good. And, obviously, like I said, got his point total, got his, but Jamarcus Lawrence, as well as other guys, but mostly Jamarcus Lawrence, played really good defense on him, played really good. Lawrence in particular played pretty strong two-way ball in this one, and also has really started to truly break out of that offensive slump. I don't remember if I saved it on Twitter, but I saw a really good tweet, and so I'm not going to know who tweeted out. I'll check an account like Rhode Vault as I sit here with y'all. But Lawrence was pretty awful to start conference play, which is a shame because he's a really good kid, and I had the pleasure of writing a feature on Lawrence. He's just an amazing guy. No, it's not up here on Rhode Vault as far as I can tell. But he started off poor, averaging I think I saw it was like 3.5 points in conference play to start through the first 4 games. I want to say something like that, and then from there, he's gotten, I don't want to say hot, but he's broken back out a little bit. The shooting has been better. He's made some pretty nice threes. It was just a much better performance for Lawrence offensively, while that defensive capabilities continue to shine. So I finally got pulled up. So in his last, all right, we'll start at Loyola Chicago, where Lawrence got hurt, but in 20 minutes, he had 9 points. And then Davidson, 20 minutes, 7 points, nursing an ankle injury. 23 minutes against VCU, 8 points. That one pulled. Again, probably due to injury management, but also Rhode Island just got blown out. Then turns around in the last 2 games, 14 points on 14 shots against LaSalle, but then again, 13 points against Massachusetts. In his last 3 games, he's made multiple threes. In fact, in his last 5, he's made at least 1. So Lawrence has started to really turn the corner offensively as of late. I feel like with his defense and his foul trouble, because I've heard discussion about it, I feel bad for him because he comes from Nebraska in the Big Ten, and I asked him earlier in the season in a press conference about foul trouble, and he said he felt like the officiating style was just different, and he would have to figure it out. And then when I did the profile on him a couple weeks later, he said that he felt frustrated just because he felt like he couldn't really communicate with the officials. Hopefully, only 10 officials listens to this and finds them for NIL money. But regardless, officiating has just been difficult in the Atlantic 10. This one, the biggest issue with officiating for me in this one, and it's a big issue around the world of college basketball, NBA too, but really college basketball, where we get these unnecessary reviews. We had 3 reviews in 3 minutes of game time, and those reviews, of course, end up probably being like 10 total minutes of review time at that monitor, and not even 3 minutes of game time had elapsed. We also saw a pretty awful call against Cam Estevez where they gave him a flagrant 1 when it looked like a defender sort of just ran into the back of him on a Thomas fast break, which would have been an easy layup for Sebastian Thomas. Instead, it wasn't. Instead, it was free throws for UMass and UMass possession where they scored. It was a 7 or a 5-point swing in that moment alone. David Fuchs was also assessed to tech. I think it's the second one of the season. David, in my opinion, has done a really good job of managing his emotions as of late. But he's known for being a fiery player, which I appreciate about him. I like that intensity and effort. And if you go on Rhodey Burner Twitterverse, the fans appreciate it too. Because every game, David Fuchs comes out there and wants to rebound. He wants to play physical basketball. He wants to dunk the ball. And I'm not saying, every guy on the team doesn't play hard every game, but I think that most people agree that David Fuchs is one of the hardest playing players on that team. So overall, Rhode Island played 17 minutes of fantastic basketball and then 15 or 14 minutes of just awful basketball. We saw some pretty amazing moments too, right? Like the Sebastian Thomas huge 4-point play, which was awesome. It was just awesome. And then we also saw Bassie had 0 points through the first 15 minutes of the second half. He took a bad three when it was just a 6-point game. But he did do a great job of drawing fouls later on. Lawrence, I thought, I have some game notes here, made some beautiful passes that were sold by his teammates. So his assist number is a little lower than what I actually thought he displayed. His catch and shooting looked really good. It was nice to see him get those opportunities. If you follow Rhodey men's basketball on Instagram, it's a great video of Josh Paiva, I assume, miking the guys up. And Lawrence talks about how he's excited to be a better catch and shoot 3-point shooter. When I talked to him as well, he talked about offensively, that's one of his favorite things to do. Jaden House played a great game. I mean, again and again, this kid is just one of the best finishers in the conference, probably one of the best finishers in the country for his height. If you specifically just listed players that are 6'4", like I said, he came down with a massive rebound, and he got fouled 9 times. 9 times Jaden House was fouled. He only ended up shooting, let's pull it up here, 11 free throws, which is a lot, 9 of 11, so he executed on those as well. But yeah, getting fouled 9 times is crazy. I did hate a transition 3 that he took. I hate transition 3s at the college level. College players are typically much worse 3-point shooters than NBA players, and even then, there are tons of good NBA players and just tons of NBA players in general who shouldn't shoot transition 3s that do. But if you're not in the NBA, or if you're not like a 40%, 42% plus 3-point shooter, do not take transition 3s. David Green, it was nice to finally see him get that touchback, right, with that favorite shot of his from the block, the left-handed hook. He made a huge corner 3 later in the game. I thought Javonte Brown played one of his best games defensively inside the paint. Came down with, I believe, 4 blocks and should have had a 5th one, but they called a pretty awful foul. Yeah, 4 blocks. Should have had a 5th. It was a pretty awful foul call, in my opinion. And he had 3 steals as well. So just 7 stocks. Could have been 8 stocks. Fantastic game for Javonte Brown. Did a really good job inside the paint. And then David Fuchs, like I mentioned earlier, was able to kind of give Rhode Island that punch off the bench early on in this game, and Rhode Island was getting punched in the mouth to start the game. And that's funny enough. During media availability this week, I believe it was Monday, Sebastian Thomas talked about it, that Rhode Island just tends to get punched in the mouth first almost every single game, and sometimes they find a way to win it, sometimes they don't. But nice to see the team respond this time around. I thought Quinton had great hands, had a nice ball. There was one moment where he came down with the rebound, had a nice ball fake, and then went back up with it. Or after a hop step. It was a really nice play from Q. No notes on Drisa Traore and Tyone Farrell. He's missed the last 4 games, I believe, maybe 5. No, I think it's 4. Rolled his ankle in the shoot-around before the Loyola Chicago game on the dreaded day when Rhode Island rolled 3 ankles in one day. Since then, the freshman starter, like I just said, has missed all the games. But he's been practicing. It was really funny. There was a availability that I ended up missing, but I heard Miller said that Ty was out indefinitely. And that same night, we saw him warming up, or maybe it was the next day, we saw him warming up in layup lines. Ended up not playing. He's warmed up pretty much every game that he's been hurt. But it sounds like from what we heard from Coach Archie Miller that Tyone Farrell, I'm really curious to see what the rotation looks like when he comes back, but Tyone Farrell after this week off, Rhode Island finally getting their first, or their only bye. I think they only get one bye, but they're the last team to get a bye. If you didn't know that, every other team in the Atlantic 10 has only played 8 or 7 games. Rhode Island has played 9. And, you play every Saturday and Wednesday, sometimes on a Tuesday, sometimes on a Friday. They've played every time, right? Whether it was the Saturday, Friday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They've played every time. So get a week off, get the Saturday off, return on Wednesday against Fordham. Tyrone Farrell should be healthy for that one. And when I said it under my breath, I'm really, really, really interested to see what the lineups look like. Will Tyrone end up back in the starting 5? I like him in the starting 5. If you know me, you know how I feel about Jaden House. I think he's a fantastic player in the 6-man spark plug sort of position. Obviously, he's had a couple of good games as of late starting, so maybe you do keep him in the starting lineup. He was really good against Massachusetts in the starting 5. He has become a much better passer, much more willing passer, really, than he has been in the past, which is obviously a fantastic development. And he's a really good rebounding guard. Been a better defender this year than he has been in years past. But Tyrone, to me, is the one true wing on this team. 6'6" frame, long arms, athletic, not afraid of the number 1 assignment. I remember against Providence late in the game, he was standing up Bryce Hopkins, forcing him to pick up his dribble. It was awesome to watch. He's not afraid of anybody. I really like that about Tyrone Farrell, but the offense just isn't there. And you hope during this recovery process for him, maybe we'll see an offensive jump when he returns, but that's unlikely since he'll be nursing an injury, obviously. He's probably not going to be 100% upon his return. As for Massachusetts, I didn't really have too much to say. Obviously, this is more about Rhode Island for us on here on Beta Bay. For me on Beta Bay ball. I do love Frank Martin. I love how tough he is on his guys, even when they're up. I thought that everyone, for the most part, whether it was Rivera or Curry or Diggins, played really well. There's some names here that I can't really pronounce, but Guy, I'm not sure you say that one. He was awful. I also thought that Worthy was not so good for them. Those two guys I thought were the weak links for Massachusetts. Outside of them, everyone else I thought played really well. If we look at those guys' stats, yeah. I can't say this. The guy who I can't say his last name, it ends with Guy. So we'll call him Jaden Guy. Jaden Guy finished with 4 fouls, 2 turnovers, 1 of 4 from the field. And he had 3 points, but those didn't come until the very last, during that big UMass run. Up until that run, he was absolutely dreadful. And then Worthy played 16 minutes where he finished with the worst plus-minus. I didn't even know that until I just read that to you guys, but that makes sense. He was visibly the worst player on the court, even though he played less minutes than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 other players. So he played the 6th most minutes. He led the team in turnovers. It was just ugly basketball for him. Was not a good defender either. But yeah, thought Rhode Island played. I don't know. I don't really know. It's hard to take something away from a game where, like I said, I was kind of reading a little bit from my recap. You expect a game with that final score to be awesome to watch, glued to your seat, back and forth, Massachusetts, Rhode Island basketball. As Frank Martin said, one of those UMass URI games that you watch on your TV growing up. Instead, it was basically slow start for Rhode Island. Massachusetts not playing too great themselves, so Rhode Island sticks around. And then all of a sudden, Rhode Island just beats the crap out of Massachusetts. And then all of a sudden, Massachusetts beats the crap out of Rhode Island. And then in the final couple minutes, Rhode Island pulls themselves together. Their lead big enough to just hold on in those final few moments of the game. So, good win for Rhode Island. You get to 4-5. You are now the 9th seed. Last time I checked, which means you do get a bye. You avoid fighting in Pillow Fight Wednesday this year, not a Tuesday. And with Fordham up next on the docket, Fordham has not been good this season. They've been maybe the worst team in the conference, but they have been better under their interim head coach, who I don't know his name. I do know, though, that their head coach, Keith Ergo, not Lugo, Ergo, who was suspended for recruiting violations, self-reported recruiting violations. Apparently, they spent too much money or time on entertainment, whatever that might be. Suspended 4 games. He returns to the sidelines for the game against Rhode Island. It will be at Fordham. Rhode Island has struggled massively on the road under Archie Miller. So it'll be a really good opportunity to sort of right that ship a little bit. Obviously, Miller would have to spend a lot more time at Rhode Island, have a lot of good winning seasons to get that road record to even sort of a respectable area. But would be good to start against Fordham, especially because next up for Rhode Island after Fordham is George Mason in George Mason, and Rhode Island was lucky to beat George Mason the first time, in my opinion. They shot below 40% in that game. I think they shot below 30% in the first half alone. George Mason at the time featured a top 5 defense in the country. I'm sure that's come back down a little bit, but George Mason has been the surprise of the conference. I think their coach is Tony Skinn, I think. He's fantastic, and they've done a really good job there. And then after George Mason, they're home against St. Bonaventure, which will be another one of those games that is season defining, especially if you get the win against Fordham and maybe somehow a win against George Mason, just because you're right now tied with St. Bonaventure in the standings, and St. Bonaventure is still a better team. Then LaSalle would be nice to get revenge against a bad LaSalle team, this time in the Ryan Center. And then you have Dayton at home, Massachusetts in UMass. The last time those two teams will ever play against each other in the Atlantic 10, of course, unless they play in the postseason. Then St. Joe's, who's been really, really good. Rasheer Fleming is awesome, a projected first-round pick in the NBA. I think he's probably the highest projected pick out of the Atlantic 10. And then to end the season with a home game against Fordham. So at 4-5 in the conference, let's say you get to 5-5, then 5-6. We'll say St. Bonaventure gets the win. You fall to 5-7, then beat LaSalle 6-7. Lose to St. Louis. Yeah, it's going to be tough sledding here for Rhode Island. So you have to get that win against Fordham. You have to get that win against LaSalle. You have to get that win against Fordham the second time. So you have 3 must-win games. And even then, you're going to finish. That would only give you a total of 7 wins on the year. So you'll have to find a way to make it up elsewhere. But yeah, that's my take on Rhode Island men's basketball today. That's my recap. We got that done a lot quicker today than we did last time. I think last time I just spent a lot of... Actually, you know what? We're not done, because I'm thinking about last episode when I sort of ranted about my issues with Rhode Island and their three-point shooting. This time we didn't see that. We did not see a ton of three-point shooting, and the three-point shooting that we did was a lot more efficient for Rhode Island. Rhode Island this time around took a ton of shots at the rim, and they shot 70% at the rim, which is absolutely fantastic. That's what you want from this team. I think this team should be doing that a lot more. Jaden House, like I mentioned, I think he's probably one of the best finishers in the country for any player that is 6'4" or shorter. Sebastian Thomas, also really, really good inside the paint, whether it's his floater or whatever. He's really good. David Green, obviously good at the rim too with that hook shot of his. And then obviously Then obviously guys like Javonte Brown and David Fuchs are dunkers. So I was happy to see a lot more of that. Rhode Island, the turnovers were still a little bit of an issue, especially in that backcourt. I mean, 6 combined, or I guess 9 if you include, well, it's kind of hard. Who is the shooting guard? Who's the small forward? We don't really play in a position era of basketball anymore. So if you say the 3 guards that started, Thomas, House, Lawrence, you had 9 turnovers from those guys. And then Cam Estevez, your backup guard, also with 3 turnovers himself. So 12 turnovers from your guards is not ideal. It's not good at all. But, all of those guys also had decent, okay assist numbers. Sebastian Thomas was 7, including 6 in the second half. And Cam Estevez with 3 assists in 13 minutes. But yeah, was much happier with Rhode Island's shot selection, was happy with Rhode Island's defense for a decent portion, for about 3/5 of the game. And the rebounding was about good for that same amount of time, 3/5 of the game. So that's it for Rhode Island men's basketball. As for the women, what a turnaround on their season. They now get to 11-11. They've won on the road a decent bit this year, 5-5 on the road, 6-4 at home, 6-3 in conference play is the most impressive part. I did get to call the game against UMaine. That was a disappointing loss for Rhode Island, and you could have gotten out to a 3-1 start. Instead, you fell to 2-2, and then a bad loss at home against St. John's, where Tammy Reese was sick. And then we saw an absolute thumping of UMass Lowell, a good win over Brown. And then they went to the Cancun Challenge, where they entered the fourth quarter beating or tied with number 22 Iowa. I'm not sure if they're still number 22. And then it was a 12 or a 14-0 run to start that fourth quarter for Iowa, and that was it for Rhode Island. Then a really heartbreaking close loss to Idaho State, and that was at the Cancun Challenge. Then they return home for another close loss to Providence. And then you get not blown out, but a 12-point loss at Harvard, and then another 12-point loss at Princeton. Tammy Reese loves the schedule of the Ivy League schools. Then you get your easy win, right? Your Education Day free admission. I was on the call for that one with Zach Petrick. It was a fantastic win for the team. And then you start conference play, and it's a 20-point win over St. Louis, and it's a nearly 40-point win over St. Bonaventure on the road. Lose by 10 points to Davidson, lose by 14 to George Mason, and you get beat up on VCU on the road, lose decently to Duquesne on the road, come back home, and you barely beat UMass, but you get a win. And then you thump Loyola Chicago and turn around and absolutely annihilate Fordham. At one point in this game, it was 42-17. It ended up being a 53-35 win. Next up for the women's squad is Richmond, who is fantastic. Probably easily by far the best team in this conference, nearly a top 25 team in the nation. So if somehow Rhode Island was able to pull out that win against Richmond, it would send the fan base into a frenzy. As for the game alone, we continue to see a huge breakout for Sophie Vitale. She played a fantastic game. She won Player of the Game for the team. That they hand out after the game. She finished with 15, 6 and 5. Or no, Jesus, 15, 6 and 4. 4 turnovers, but Rhode Island sort of turned it over. So I didn't get to watch this one because I was at the men's game, but maybe it was just one of those. Leading by so much, you end up kind of getting loose with the ball. But no Inez Dubras. Didn't matter. Sophie Vitale has taken that starting job as of late, and she's really run with it. I've heard some people call her Superstar Soph, and while I love that nickname, I think we should hold on for a little bit longer. She's still a sophomore. Maybe we'll see a true Superstar Soph come junior year, but she's definitely been a breakout player, and Tammy Reese loves to call her Little P because Big P, Sophie Phillips, three threes on the day for the all-time leading three maker, however you say that, at Rhode Island. Honey Carr with another double-double, 11 and 12. Fantastic day for her. Dutot came down with 9 boards, doing what she does best, although she was 0 of 6 from the field. Oh, no. Honey Carr didn't have a double-double. I was reading Kumara. Honey Carr, 2 of 9. Not great. 8 and 7 though. But yeah, shout out Kamara, another double-double. She's been fantastic this season, sort of on that Maya Torre pipeline, right? So many French forwards have come out of Rhode Island in the past 4 or 5 years, thanks to assistant coach Amadou, who does a fantastic job recruiting, and he's a great post coach for this team. So yeah, Kamara has just been absolutely fantastic this season, and I'm going to be on the broadcast with Aiden Garvey on February 8th against Dayton, so that'll be an exciting game for this women's team, and they have just been so awesome as of late, and they played pretty fantastic defense in that win. So that's it for Rhode Island basketball, both men's and women's. Next, I'm going to once again sort of get into the NBA talk again about the trade deadline. This time, some better notes, some less sounding stupid. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Trade deadline is now 7 days away. So, right? No, 6 days away. We are 6 days away, almost nearly to a T. However many hours is in 6 days. I'm not doing the math right now. Plus an extra 2. I think it's at 6 o'clock, or maybe it's at 3 o'clock. So maybe -1. Regardless, very close to the NBA trade deadline. So we're going to jump into that next. And we're back for the NBA trade deadline talk. And I want to preface this with kind of I shouldn't say sorry, but sorry to my visual listeners to this, guy, people, ladies, whoever watching on YouTube. I really appreciate you listening this far. Anybody listening this far, whether it's on Spotify or YouTube, thank you so much. I've sort of forgot at times that I'm on camera, so I'm not really looking at the camera. I'm looking down at the desk. I'm looking over here. And if you are watching the the visual, hello, we are in a new setting today. Lighting is better, right? I'm not in the dark today. I try to use a better camera, but I mean, like, if you're watching, look at this thing. This thing is an old piece of, I don't want to say junk because it was probably really good for its time, but it's old. Doesn't work with my computer. Probably would have fallen over as well at a certain point. But regardless, we're here to talk about the NBA and the upcoming trade deadline. Some new news is broken. I think we talked about De'Aaron Fox last time, but now De'Aaron Fox is like, it's happening. And originally it was reported that Fox was the one they wanted out, but then it was reported that the Kings were actually the one that approached him about it, which I think is really stupid. If you're the Kings, I think you should try to keep him at all costs. I don't think it'll happen, him being a All NBA player, but if he was to be an All NBA player this year, he would be eligible for a Supermax, but only with the Kings. So I feel like if you're the Kings, you want to keep him, but I guess they feel like it's time to pivot from De'Aaron Fox, which is ridiculous to me. Because if you, excuse me, if you think about what the Kings have done over the last 4 years, in the last 4 trade deadlines, they have either not made a move, or 4 years ago they traded Tyrese Halliburton for Sabonis, which ended up working out pretty darn good for both sides. But still, you trade away Tyrese Halliburton. That's a big player to trade away. Obviously, he was different at the time. Wasn't nearly the same player he was today. But yeah, trade away Halliburton, and now you might trade away Fox, and that's brutal if you're a Kings fan. And my younger brother, he's a huge De'Aaron Fox fan, and so by proxy, he's really enjoyed Kings basketball for the last however many years Fox has been there, and it's just a shame that he won't be there much longer. It seems, and when I think of De'Aaron Fox, I think of the Kings, and vice versa, and it stinks that he's not going to be around much longer. It seems. Like I said, I don't think he'll reach the All NBA. Not because he doesn't really deserve it, because I think he's having a fantastic season, and I thought he should have been an All Star over James Harden, but more so because he plays in Sacramento. And we already just saw Sabonis snub from the All Star game. De'Aaron Fox, in my opinion, snubbed from the All Star game more so than Sabonis was, because they play in Sacramento. I mean, obviously that's my opinion, but I think a lot of people would agree that small market players have a much more difficult time getting into the All Star game. And so, on the topic of De'Aaron Fox, where do we think he is going to go? We've heard rumors that maybe the Miami Heat come out and get him. And if you're Sacramento, I don't really like that, because I don't know what you can get from the Heat except Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler might not try for you. He might not care to be there. He probably doesn't want to be there. So you're not going to get Jimmy Butler giving you effort, and thus he's not going to resign. So you're giving away a top 5 player, top 4, top 3 player in the history of your franchise, if you're Sacramento, for a guy that might not be there in a year or so. So I really don't know what they're going to do. I think that the Spurs are probably the best landing spot for him. But the thing with trading for De'Aaron Fox is he's going to be a free agent soon. And why give up good assets when you could wait for him to sign, especially if he wants to be in San Antonio, which is sort of, what he has. We don't know for sure, but the reports are saying that the rumors are saying he wants to be in San Antonio. He wants to be that guy, I guess, outside of Chris Paul, that first guy that wants to go and team up and be the 1B to Victor Wembanyama. And why wouldn't you be? I think his game would work really well with a guy like Victor Wembanyama, whose game really wouldn't work well next to a guy for Victor Wembanyama. And the Spurs have the assets to make it happen. They have 9 tradable first-round picks. They have the contracts to package, although I do not want to see them move on from a guy like Chris Paul. But there's some other guys that you can move on. I also would not want to see the Spurs, trade away Stephon Castle to make it happen. Stephon Castle, besides the fact that he's the worst jump shooter in the NBA this season, I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's a great defender. I think he's a very capable passer. I think one day he will develop into a somewhat serviceable, decent shooter. And when he does develop that jump shot, he's going to be an amazing player next to Victor Wembanyama. And could be if De'Aaron Fox doesn't land in San Antonio, maybe even if he does, Stephon Castle will start in that Spurs backcourt at some point in the future. Orlando Magic, I love the idea of the Magic trading for him. I talked about it in the last podcast. I really think the Magic need to go out and trade for a guard. Obviously I get it. Like, the Magic probably won't make a move. You've had a lot of weird things happen Paulo was playing out of his mind to start the season, then tore his oblique, missed a lot of time. And then while he was out, Franz Wagner played a fantastic basketball, was really an all-star. But then he gets injured, so he doesn't really get enough games played to be an all-star. But yeah, he tore his oblique or injured his oblique as well. And then you've had just injuries all across the board, whether it was Wendell Carter, Jalen Suggs is still missing time. Anthony Black has missed games. Jonathan Isaac, per usual, has missed time. It's a good roster. It's a really good team that would be higher in the standings if they could stay healthy. So I get not wanting to add another player to that mix. And then you'd have to worry about signing him. Although I think why wouldn't you want to sign with Orlando? I've been to Orlando a couple of times. My sister's living down there right now. It's a beautiful place. It's a good place to be. It's a good part of Florida. It's not like Jacksonville. Sorry, no shade, but it's true. And there's also no state income tax, right? So whatever that contract is, you pay your jock tax. You pay. I think you probably still pay your federal income tax. You pay your money to your agent, and of course, obviously, you give money to everyone else in your life that you feel like you should be giving money to. It's one of my favorite reasons why athletes get paid so much, because they actually do good things with their money. But that is besides the point. You get the money that you deserve to get paid if you're De'Aaron Fox signing with Orlando. If you're Orlando, you could make it work with some picks. You could probably package some guys together. KCP's contract, Jonathan Isaac's contract, and then you could throw in some young and entertaining players. Anthony Black, maybe. Although I really do like Anthony Black there. Maybe they'd be willing to take on what's his name, the son of the guy that played for the Fab Five. Oh, I can't remember. Oh, not Howard. It's not a Howard. If you know basketball, if you know the Magic, is it? It might be Juwan Howard's son. Am I tripping? I have to look it up now. I really do. I mean, I can't continue like this not knowing who the heck I'm talking about. Of course, they don't play today. Do they play tomorrow? There they are, 24-25. Magic. What is going on? All right, who is it again? It is. Why can't I find him? Oh, and Mo Wagner's. Oh, yeah, Jet Howard. It is. All right, Jet Howard. Yeah, he's. We've seen Mo Wagner, a good backup center, in my opinion. A very good, serviceable backup center, has missed a lot of time. So yeah, it's just been a very difficult year injury-wise for the Orlando Magic. But so I would get not wanting to bring in De'Aaron Fox because you just kind of want to run the course with the team you have this year. I mean, last year, if you remember, they couldn't. And I talked about it on the last pod. They're one of the worst shooting teams. They are the worst shooting team in the modern era of basketball. But last year, they took a good Cavs team to 7 games in the first round. And obviously, the Magic are a better team this year than they were last year. So I get not wanting to add anything to that. So we'll move on from Orlando, and we'll talk about maybe the Rockets going after him. But it's the same thing with the Rockets. You just have such a good young team right now, and so many pieces trying to find where they reside. That why add a guy to that mix to sort of step on toes and whatnot. I think what I've really loved in the last couple of years is I've fallen in love with this sport is you see these teams make the playoffs for the first time with their really young lineup, and we all know they're not going to win many games, but they learn a lot about themselves. That's what we saw last year with the Thunder. They learned that Josh Giddey just isn't playable in the playoffs unless he does develop into an okay or a reliable three-point shooter. Until he does that, teams are not going to guard him in a respectable manner come playoff time. So it's the same thing with the Magic and the Rockets. How are they going to specifically game plan for that 7-game series against your roster? You really have to learn that sort of stuff. So I get not wanting to add another guy. I have stuff to talk about with the Rockets, but before we get there, we're not going to leave the trade deadline just yet. I'm going to talk about the Pelicans. Pelicans are going to make a trade. They're going to. They're going to sell. They're going to sell a contract, is how I would put it, because we don't know if it's going to be Brandon Ingram that goes, or Zion, or a Herb Jones, or a Trey Murphy. Although I don't think they should trade either one of those guys. We don't know, it probably won't be DeJounte Murray considering how good Dyson Daniels has been in Atlanta and how much you gave up to get him. But the Pelicans, for a long time now, or maybe ever, have never, yeah, I think it's ever. I don't think that, I'm just like repeating myself like a parrot. I don't think the Pelicans have ever finished above the luxury tax. And right now, they need to sell contracts $8 or $10 million to get under that mark. And that could be a lot of different people that aren't that good. If we pull up the Pelicans team this year, the first one that comes to my mind that I can tell you without looking at the roster is Daniel Tice, known shareholder of RIFC. Fantastic person. Javonte Green as well could end up being traded away. We could see CJ McCollum, which is a much more notable person. I forgot about him. But yeah, if we're just talking about purely from like a contract standpoint, I do think that maybe we'll see a Daniel Tice or a Jose Alvarado or a Javonte Green. So some of those guys, or maybe even a Jeremiah Robinson Earl, like guys that don't do anything, that are totally irrelevant for the most part. Those guys might end up getting traded, or we do see the big time trade, and we see, a Brandon Ingram or a Zion get shipped. And I really want to see Zion move on. And I think they should move on from BI. BI is not going to re-sign. We all know that. So why let him walk for nothing when you could get even just a couple of second-round picks and maybe an interesting young player? I think you should ship him off to Detroit. If I'm Detroit, I'm calling to get him. I heard it earlier from the wonderful Kenny Beecham. That's where this comes from. Enjoy basketball. Fantastic brand. There's a huge gap between Cade Cunningham and the second best player on the Pistons. The Pistons are awesome this year. Tobias Harris playing great, which is awesome because, a big screw you to Philly. He's been much better than Paul George has been this season. Beef stew has been a lot of fun for that team. Who am I blanking on? Not Malik Beasley. Who is the guy on the Pistons that's just been absolutely awesome this year? Shooting lights out, one of the best bench scorers in the league. Why am I forgetting his name? Huh. Oh, yeah, Malik Beasley. It was Malik. Yeah, you have Malik Beasley, who's been fun. Ron Holland has added some intensity off the bench. Ron Holland being born in 2005 makes me feel old right now. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been a fantastic veteran add. And then Marcus Sasser with the injury to Jaden Ivey. I really like Marcus Sasser, 4-year guy out of Houston. I like watching him play. He was one of the few fun parts about that team last year when they stunk it up. So, yeah, I don't think the Pistons are the only team in the NBA, as far as I know, below the salary cap. They have $10 million available, so they could take on a contract during the season. And I don't think you really have to give up really anybody too detrimental to your team in order to get BI. Maybe you even give up Fontecchio, because I don't think you give up Ron Holland. You know what? Bobby Klintman is really interesting to me. He went to Wake Forest for a little bit. I believe he also played overseas. I thought he played overseas in Australia, but I guess not. I don't see it anywhere on his basketball reference, but that's okay. Swedish player he's only played 2 games this year for like a total of 6 minutes. So like I get it. Probably not the guy you want to add if you're New Orleans, but I think New Orleans will make a trade. They're going to dump salary. It'll be interesting to see who they add. And do I have any other trade talk? No. Okay. Instead, I have a long conversation with y'all about the Rockets, and then a little bit about the Magic, and a little bit about the Pistons. All right. So let's start. Let's start with Amen Thompson, the story of the NBA. So real quick, I want to take a peek at the Rockets here. How many games have they played since January 28th? All right, they've played 1 game. All right, so in the 5 games leading up to the game against the Grizzlies last night, which was a really good game, that had a pretty interesting ending with Jalen Wells and Taylor Jenkins timeout. But leading up to that game, the Houston Rockets had gone 4-1. In fact, their only loss came to the Pistons. And shout out the Pistons beating them, the Rockets in the Rockets' own arena. Anyways, 4-1. They had a win over the Celtics where Dylan Brooks had 10 threes, one of 4 players to ever hit 10 threes against the Celtics in TD Garden. And obviously, Amen, you probably saw, had the game-winning bucket against Jaylen Brown, played fantastic defense in that game, had a career high, I think 32 points or something like that. They played a fantastic game against the Cavs, where, the best team in the East. Darius Garland had nearly 40 points in that game, but it did not matter because Amen had 23, 14, and 10. And All-Star Alperen Şengün had a really good game. And then they beat the Atlanta Hawks, and they kind of fell apart at the end of that game. But they, just like Rhode Island, they were able to hold on long enough to come out with that win. But wasn't a really good look for the Rockets considering Jalen Johnson, who's done for the year, which is really, really sad. Zachary Richardson, Kobe Buffkin, and Clint Capella all missed that one. But in that one, we saw Amen actually kind of struggle now that I look at the box score. So, yeah, but even with that pretty poor performance leading into it, or you know what, maybe this is counting the game against the Trailblazers. It probably is if we check out the stats. So, where is he on here? He didn't play. Okay, yeah. So, all right. Yeah, so in the last 5 games, including that 11-point stinker, 22 points per game, 11 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 2.2 steals, and he shot nearly 60% from the floor. And then, like last night, he reached that 21-point mark, a little shy on the rebounds, a little shy on pretty much everything else, but he had 4 blocks, all of which came in the first half. So he played pretty darn good basketball. And he's just been on fire. I mean, and this is a guy that doesn't even have a jump shot yet. So can you imagine how good this guy is going to be when he gets a jumper? I mean, that's just incredible. He's 50th percentile in driving per 36, as well as 50 percentile in efficiency on those drives. So can you imagine how good he'll be when he develops a little bit more, right? Because at this point, this will probably be the worst he'll be, barring playing with an injury. And yeah, he's still 50 percentile in drives, right? So that number will go up. And then if that efficiency number goes up from being 50th percentile, how many points can this guy average? And he doesn't even have a jumper, which is interesting. I really am curious to see how teams go about defending Amen Thompson come playoff time. It'll be very interesting to see if he sort of gets a similar treatment to the likes of Josh Giddey, right? So, fantastic player, really fun to watch. You see some funny discourse on Twitter, people talking about, is this a guy that is going to be a top 30 player ever if he can develop a jumper? There's a chance he might really be. Yeah, just very, very interesting stuff that Amen Thompson has been doing as of late. Like I mentioned, Dylan Brooks, fantastic game against the Celtics, but still a little bit of an idiot. I was watching the Hawks game, and the Hawks went on a 15-2 run to end that game, and with 47 seconds left, it was a 3-point game, and we saw Dylan Brooks put his hand, and if you're watching the video, he takes his hand, he grabs the back of Trae Young's neck almost, and somehow both guys got issued a text, so Trae Young must have said something wild, or the referee somehow felt that Trae Young being all little compared to Dylan Brooks walking up and putting his chest up to him was the same as Dylan Brooks grabbing Trae Young by the neck, even though we watched it on replay. I'm sorry for the noise upstairs. Part of the issue with being down here with the better lighting is sacrificing some of the noise. But yeah, just Dylan Brooks, very, very, very stupid. And then I wrote down that like getting in the face of someone is not the same as putting your hands around somebody's neck. So that's my Rockets talk. Now we have 2 more talking points, and I will not be here. I won't hold you much longer. Are the bad boy Pistons back? Are the bad boy Pistons back? We have seen Ron Holland willing to fight people We've seen Cade Cunningham with plenty of attitude, Jade Ivey with plenty of attitude, and of course, if I'm bringing up Bad Boy Pistons, we got to talk about Beef Stew. The other night, gets ejected for pretty much obliterating Thomas Bryant on the elbow on a not even really a box out because he was face guarding him, obliterates him in a face guarding position. Ends up getting ejected, but while they're replaying the thing and the refs are at the monitor, we see him make a 2-finger gun gesture at the Pacers bench and shoot said gun gesture. And then obviously everyone knows about him trying to kill LeBron and everything else that Beef Stew does. And I'm a big fan of Isaiah Stewart. He's awesome, in my opinion. I have no issue with it. I like physical basketball. I like the intensity. I love high-flying emotions. That's just the kind of person I am. But I love this attitude that the Pistons have played with. I really, really have. I mean, this is a team that for 3 years in a row was the worst team, bar none, in the NBA. Now they should be a playoff team, which does mean that their pick, first round pick, will go elsewhere. And I can't remember which team ends up getting their pick, but it's fine. I think you'll take a playoff berth after all these years in sacrifice of like the 16th, 17th, 18th overall pick. Yeah, right now they are the 8th seed behind the Magic. They are 4-6 in their last 10, so they haven't been all too great. They're 23-24. That's just the nature of the East. It's incredibly, grossly top heavy. But yeah, they should be a playoff team nonetheless this year if they're able to hold on, especially considering they're above the likes of Atlanta and Chicago, two teams expected to sell at the deadline. So that's enough Rockets talk. Or Rockets, Jesus, look at me. I guess they do have a Thompson twin. Enough Pistons talk. I believe we're probably near like the 50-minute mark or maybe even longer. Last talking point I want to get to is the Orlando Magic, and I think this is my last talking point. I like to save stuff on Twitter. So before I get into my last talking point about the Magic, let's just go through some of my bookmark stuff on Twitter that I felt like maybe I should mention. Miami Heat interest in Julius Randle. That better be an offseason thing. It does seem to be, according to Ian Begley. It's pretty reputable. I don't hate it per se with Julius Randle. I don't know how he'd fit with Bam. But at the same time, he wouldn't start. I think if they start Julius Randle, they're idiots because Khalil Ware is where it's at. Khalil Ware is awesome. If he plays or starts the rest of the season, he could easily win Rookie of the Year despite not really playing for the first half of the season. Kyle Kuzma, really stupid quote talking about trying to not fit in or he's done fitting in with the Wizards. You're an idiot because that's what you signed up for. He said, and I quote, I think today I just decided to myself and not really – what? I think today I just decided to be myself and not really try to fit into everything that we're doing here. A little bit later, he says, just being more assertive, demanding the ball, and not going out there and just letting people develop. That is ridiculous. Not letting people develop. You chose to sign with the Wizards. You're the guy that said you didn't want to be traded to the Mavericks last year. Now, I think that Kuzma can fit in and plug and play with other teams and would take a lesser role in a winning team. And I did like him for quite some time. I'm out on him right now. I mean, how can you say that when you're on a team like the Wizards? You're the one that chose to be there. You're the one that knew how bad they were going to be. You knew you were going to be playing next to guys that are first, second, fifth, eighth, picks in the draft. You knew that. So that's on you for really just a really dumb decision, in my opinion. And then we also saw Maxi Kleber go break his right foot. He'll be down for a long time, so it'll be interesting to see if the Mavs make a move. I still think they should go out and maybe get someone like Robert Williams if they can afford to, or maybe get a Miles Turner. I know he's been in trade deadlines for like year after year after year, but this year feels a little different with the second apron. We saw the Timberwolves do it this offseason where they sent Cat away just to sort of preemptively make moves financially, open some space. And right now, the only guys on this Pacer team that don't have a contract going forward is Benedict Mathurin, who I think they'll probably bring back. Or maybe they do package Benedict Mathurin with a Miles Turner, or maybe they just send Mathurin away himself, or maybe they just send Turner away himself. But you trade one of those two guys or both in order to save money by trading them for a very competent winning player, maybe some picks as well. And that way you're just saving on salary. Yeah, everything else besides like, okay, Jokic had a fantastic day. Robert Williams has really come on lately, and like I mentioned, Khalil Ware. So we're at the end of the pod where my final talking point is about the Orlando Magic and what has been going on with them. In the Magic's last 10 games, they are 2-8. Paolo Banchero has returned from his injury, but it's clear to me that he's still playing hurt. He is currently shooting 46% true shooting over those 10 games and is averaging 4 turnovers per game in that stretch. In this 10-game stretch, the Orlando Magic have a point differential of minus 130, and only the Washington Wizards, who are on a 16-game losing streak, their second of the season, have been worse in that time. Orlando, I mentioned earlier, I think they should trade for De'Aaron Fox, but I understand the thought process of not wanting to throw more production players, whatever, into the mix with all the guys that you have. But at the same time, your team is collapsing. I mentioned on the last podcast, you feature a bottom 3 offense, or at least I think like a bottom 3 offense in the NBA. Well, we know that that's partially due to injuries. It was still true last year when you weren't injured. And you're shooting 30% from 3 or something like that as a team. You're shooting 6% worse than league average. And you're one of, if not the worst shooting team of the modern era by quite a lot. Now, when I say it out loud, it makes more sense to me why they wouldn't want De'Aaron Fox, not known for being a good 3-point shooter. So I sort of get that. But regardless, he would boost your offense, and maybe you could also, allow the Kings to wash their hands of Kevin Huerter, and maybe he shoots better in Orlando than he has in Sacramento this season. But then you'd probably have to end up giving up Anthony Black, I don't think they want to do. I think you're fine parting ways with Jonathan Isaac, really because he can't stay healthy, but. I don't know. Magic got to do something. They got to add somebody. They got to add any sort of shooting or offense or something. If you're Orlando, things just haven't looked good for them as of late. Things have looked really good for teams like the Indiana Pacers, Milwaukee, New York. All of those teams have played really good basketball as of late. In the West, teams that have played really good as of late. Memphis, who I learned recently has really struggled against some of the top teams in the NBA, although they did get a win over Houston last night. Who else? Clippers and Lakers have been pretty good in their last 10, as well as Minnesota. The Phoenix Suns, 7-3 in their last 10, now 2 games above 500. I believe I think they might have lost last night or 2 nights ago, but they were on a 3-game winning streak recently. Golden State Warriors tied for the 10th seed, and the San Antonio Spurs have completely collapsed. So Spurs 2-8 in their last 10. I think if the Spurs want to make their first playoff push with Wemby and sort of learn about their team, who is Keldon Johnson? Who is Devin Vassell? What can Wemby do? What about Stephon Castle as a rookie? What do those guys look like in a playoff setting? Probably not going to be a playoff setting because you probably wouldn't get the play-in, I guess. But if you want to make that push and put your team in that position to even have a chance to play a real 7-game series, you probably have to trade for De'Aaron Fox in the next couple of days here before the trade deadline. Well, that's all I got for you today. If you listened this far, again, I just want to say thank you so much. I'll say it again, if you watched the visual part of this pod, I'm sorry that I'm not really great with the camera, looking at the camera. I sort of just kind of get lost in my own mind and my phone and my computer screen, looking at what I've written down and the pages that I've pulled up. And my camera quality is not very good. Like I said, I tried to set this one up. Camera quality probably wouldn't have been good on that either. But hey, lighting was better in a different room today. It's a pretty cool room. Signed Frank Gore jersey, some beautiful pictures of Patriots moments, some great memorabilia. Beautiful, cozy room down in the basement. So that's why you hear the dogs upstairs. For my audio people, I apologize. And today I'm going to really try and separate the video portion of this from the audio in terms of Spotify. There are podcasts that I listen to that also have a visual element to them on Spotify, and I always side swipe. I listen to it, I just swipe the video off my screen. I don't really care if that little thing is on my screen. It's off to the side, it's opaque, I don't care. But last time I'm watching Teed Up with Pierre from Numbers on the Board. Enjoy Basketball. Okay, actually, I don't think I got it on the screen the first time. Enjoy Basketball. Great guy, great brand, inspiration to me. All of those guys have been really inspirational to me. He interviewed Gordon Hayward, had a visual element to it, and it kept crashing my phone. So that's my point. If the visual element to my pod is crashing, your Spotify, I mean, then I understand why you're not listening, not watching. And if I annoy the crap out of you, my voice is annoying. You already hear me talk to you enough in person. I get why you're not listening. But if you made it to the very end of this podcast, you've listened for an hour plus. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I'm really excited to keep this up, keep going with this. Everyone has a podcast nowadays. I know it to be true. But I do a lot of stuff outside of the podcast in terms of sports media. So it's kind of nice and cool to have my own thing where I can just rant on here about basketball for an hour instead of to other people, talking their ear off about something they might not care about, like Bobby Clipman and should the Pistons throw him in a trade for BI. Anyways, thank you so much again for Justin Therio. This has been the Bay to Bay Ball podcast.